I wrote a very popular article about regular kitchen fridge meat curing, and I wanted to go through a video showcasing how you can do this at home. Preserving meat at home is not complicated, but it does require a bit of a process, and the most important thing is time. The only way you can get the salt in the meat is with time, and the only way you can dry the meat out is with time. And I'm going to go through it step by step. I'm going to showcase like 5 different styles and recipes. First off is getting chunks of meat and what type of meat. So you can't go wrong with pork, you can't go wrong with beef, and pretty good in terms of the moisture they have in it. Today will be venison and pork. So here I have loin, venison loin, and I've chopped it up. I'm trying to target 250 grams of weight, which is 8.8 ounces of meat. Also, I went to the butcher and I got some good quality pork, just a chunk, which is used for a roast normally. It's a pork shoulder or pork butt. I'm taking the skin off, I'm going to salt that, and then I'm going to dry it out and make some scratchings or cracklings. I don't want to use anything with a bone ideally. This method of using it in a regular kitchen fridge. So I've split up this pork shoulder into these chunks, and now it's time to measure it out. I am going to go a little bit bigger with one, and I'll show you how to do like a saturation curing. Really about taking all the bits and pieces, the sinew and all that off, because you don't want that when you're slicing it thin and doing this like curing process. Accuracy of the scales is pretty important in one of the techniques, which is equilibrium curing in terms of grams. It really is a lot easier to use grams than to use the imperial system with ounces and what have you. So I've got 2 scales there. I've got my gold scale and then I've got another kitchen scale. Just for small amounts, you've really got to be a bit more accurate. I thought I'd just line up the spices because I'm going to do what Italian style kind of brazola, which is like pepper, rosemary, cinnamon, cloves, and I think I'm using juniper as well. Strong spices to balance out the wild flavor like juniper and rosemary. They're absolute classics. Putting in like whole peppercorns and then the spice grinder, or you can use a mortar and pestle, and getting it finer just means you'll get more coverage over it as well. You can see that the actual amount of salt is bugger all for like 8 or 9 ounces or 250 grams, and it really is not much you need as long as you're forcing the cure into it. Although you'll find that a lot of other herbs and spices, they have the ability to have antimicrobial, antifungal, anti-everything. So you'll see when I wrap it up. So I use several methods in this project just so that I could show you different ways of doing it. I've quite liked, they worked reasonably well, these resealable sous vide bags, vacuum pack bags. I washed them out very, very thoroughly 2 or 3 times, but in terms of these meat curing projects with equilibrium curing, they work really, really well. I'm using the vacuum sealer, has a pump attachment so I can suck out all the air, making sure that the inside of the bag is basically forcing the equalizing of the salt into the meat, and that's basically slowing down the water activity. You're slowing down the water activity inside the meat, you're making it an inhospitable area for unwanted bacteria, and that's basically what spoils meat. So salt is the secret ingredient. Spice grinding, and then boom, tap it out. That's all you need. And some of the other techniques, I'm just putting in plastic bags, and I've got all these grow bags from my mycelium oyster mushroom project. You can see I'm really trying to keep it tight and minimize the amount of air that's inside. Now here we have them all lined up, ready to go. All I'm going to do is put in a container. For the last chunk of meat, so I'm going to be just using a method where you just sprinkle the salt on and basically pack it on, but you're just seeing whatever sticks. If it sticks onto the meat, then that's enough. This is a lot more than the equilibrium curing, and often this does come out a lot saltier, but then at the same time, it's a very, very simple method if you don't want to measure it. So it's got a lot to do, the salt curing, with the moisture in the meat. So you've got like 70% water, I know, for pork and beef and venison, and about 20% protein and 10% other stuff. You're trying to remove a minimum for this dry curing project of about 30% of the moisture, intensifying the flavor, but also having a preserving effect where you're still balancing the flavor as well. So you're inhibiting the salt into the meat, therefore the water activity isn't moving around as much, which the unwanted spoiling bacteria needs to ruin the meat. You don't need special equipment for this. As you'll see, I just cut this to the length of the regular fridge here, and then I use little tiny hooks, and I can just hand screw those in, and then this will hang all the meat at the back of the fridge. The key step at the start is to weigh the meat before you start the curing, and then you know where you are in terms of either how much salt you're going to put onto it. Now the meat shouldn't be squishy at all, it should be quite firm, and I'll show you, or also the finishing weight when it's finished. Doesn't make a lot of difference whether you weigh it after as well it's been cured. There might be a slight variation, but there won't be much. And this was the one just sprinkled with salt. It has a firmness to it, a lot firmer than these other ones with the same pork. Now I'm just going to hold the shape of the meat as it dries. So I'm going to be doing a few ties and tying them up. I'll do a bit of a close-up for this, and I'll use a bit of muslin as well on some of them, which kind of acts like a bit of a casing and can help not dry out the meat as much in the next few weeks. I'm not the best tyer, but I keep it pretty simple. The round one here should be nice and easy. So what you can do is you do just a double hitch knot, and then you put your hand around going forward, and then you grab the meat and you just slide it across, and that'll create another loop. Around this one, I think I'll be able to go around the other way. You still want to be going around the same way to create, you still want to be going in the same way so that you create a little bit of friction tightness. You really need to tie something on so that you can hook it on something, of course, as well. Or you can jab a hole through it and then put a hook through it. Squeezing it will always help the drying. To show you, there'll be a bit of a bend, but it'll be fine, and not touching. Quite good actually that these had casings on them. Be nice and firm. And definitely by squeezing it, feel what's wrapped is drying slower. After 19 days, let's check the weights and see approximately where it's at. First one was 245 grams. Now it's 144. That is done, properly done, very dry. That's lost 30% because it was wrapped in muslin. So I'll be able to feel It definitely is softer there, but at 30% that's the minimum. I might unwrap that one and just hang it the last couple of days for a little bit more moisture loss. Pancetta 159. Again, this is going to slow it down. You can see how soft it is. Definitely slowed it down a lot. So just under 30% as a minimum. So those two need to unwrap them because they're going to be eaten on Sunday. Infused pork 162. Just under. It's quite interesting. Probably a bit more fat in this. Not just under 30%. Last one is the 300 grams, slightly bigger. Definitely developed a bit of a pellicle, still quite soft. Probably, what are we talking? 222. So here we go. After 3 weeks, this is what we have.